What did we learn from the Minnesota Wild over their first weekend of games? What did we learn throughout the NHL in the same time period? We find out today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And just a reminder, we are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we're joined by Alex Micheletti, and we will take a look at what we learned throughout the NHL over the weekend. We'll start off with the Minnesota Wild, who played their first two games of the season, and then we'll look at a broad scope of the NHL and look ahead to the week to come as well. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer, here for another full season of Minnesota Wild coverage. And happy to be joined by my guest, a Micheletti Monday, to get us going on the right foot. Alex Micheletti is here. Alex, my man, what's happening?
Not too much. How are you doing? It was a good week, first week in the NHL. A lot of exciting games and matchups. We had the Wild go 2-0 to start in the state of California, which is great to see. We had the Battle of Alberta with Edmonton and Calgary, and Connor McDavid getting a hat trick. So I mean, he's full go, and yeah, just exciting games all over the place. A lot of teams that are shockingly starting off terribly, and so we'll get into that. But yeah, just so excited to have the games back, and starting with being on ESPN and TNT. I thought good first week of coverage by them too.
Yeah, it was a great welcome back for ESPN and for TNT to have games on their airwaves again. And you talked about, as we will get into a little more in detail, a lot of teams have gotten off to slow starts here this season. The Wild, however, not one of those teams, as 2-0 after taking care of the Anaheim Ducks to start the season 2-1, and then beating the Los Angeles Kings 3-2. Now off until Tuesday night, in which the Wild will have their home opener against the Winnipeg Jets. So a couple of close games and kind of coming in different styles, as in the win against the Ducks. Wild got a goal with 7.2 seconds left from Marcus Foligno. And in the 3-2 win, the Wild had an early lead. Well, they had a second period lead that then the Kings were able to cut into in the third period, and they hung on to win. Anything of the two games, Alex, was there anything that stood out to you in terms of, concerns or things that impressed? I mean, I do have a couple of things we'll key in on, but just overall, was there anything that really impressed you about the Wild's first two wins of the year?
Cam Talbot. Like I said, I tweeted out. I said he was the best player on the ice all weekend for the Minnesota Wild. I mean, he kept it in it for them for both games, especially against the Ducks. Too, and Ducks had some really nice chances to to take it further for them. And also, I thought Kevin Fiala was fantastic, especially against the Kings. He worked his ass off, I thought, and also I was just impressed with the depth overall.
Yep.
Every line was contributing. Even the depth defensemen were great too. Yeah, it was I was just so impressed, and great coaching job by Dean Evison. And the only thing that concerned me was the first line.
Yep.
That they're still trying to work out the chemistry with that. I think it will get there. It's way too early. But yeah, that was the only thing that concerned me. And people were worried about the third pairing defenseman. But I thought they were okay. They were, when
Yeah.
you don't hear their names a lot, that's a good thing. Like we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need them to be like those top shutdown defensemen. Just need them to do their job when they're in the game. And yeah, I thought Kulikov and Merrill did just fine when they were out there. You mentioned the first line starting the season a little slow, and this was actually one of the topics I wanted to turn into our game that we're going to play called Overreaction or Not. I did this last year, and I got some nice response from listeners, so we're going to bring it back. And so we've got a handful of topics here for the Minnesota Wild, and we're just simply going to go with overreaction or not. And I'll start on that top line: Joel Eriksson Ek centering Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello. Is it time to panic for the Wild with that top line? Is it time to maybe shake things up? Is that an overreaction or not?
I think it's an overreaction. I think it's way too early.
Yeah,
Kirill and Zuccarello were still productive over the weekend. It's going to take a little bit of time, and X got to like I've said on previous podcasts with you. He's got to get used to being on the top line, and with that responsibility comes you're going to go against the top pairing D's in the division in the league. So he's got to get used to that. He's used to playing on the third line and getting those lower pairing defensemen and lower pairing centers that he's probably a lot better than. But yeah, he's never had this responsibility. It comes with that contract too. So yeah, we'll see if he's up to the task, but I still think you gotta give him a little bit of time and to gel. We saw it in the preseason, but
yeah.
the regular season's a different beast for sure.
100%. Next one is the guy who played himself into the final spot on the Wild roster, Brandon Duhaime. And, there's an interesting thought in that Rem Pitlick hasn't played through the first two games of the season. He's going to get into the lineup at some point.
Yeah.
But I feel like, and this is, a perfect kind of hot take to kind of move us through here. Obviously, somebody's going to have to sit when Pitlick goes into the lineup. Is it overreaction or not that Duhaime has taken himself off the list of players that could sit with the way that he's played through the first two games?
So 100%. He was so close to scoring against the Kings. I mean, that review was so close. A guy that I think would sit would be Nick Bukestad. He took a bad penalty against the Kings that could have
Yeah.
really got the Kings back into it. So I think with the way Duheime's playing and the energy he brings in the physical play, there's no way I don't think you could sit him right now.
And him and Sturm seem to be playing really well together. And
Yeah.
Credit to Nico, it just doing what he did for a good majority of the season last year. Winning faceoffs with that fourth line, and
Yep.
those guys are pressing the issue, even with Bukestad not being as speedy as those guys, but offering a little bit of a change of pace. That fourth line is pushing for more time already here to start the season, and so when you have a bottom six that boasts the likes of Kevin Fiala and then those guys, like that's going to be trouble if they keep doing what they're doing, and there's no reason to suggest they won't.
Right. And yeah, it was nice to see the bottom six contribute. I don't consider Kevin Fiala a bottom six type player,
Yeah,
but that's where he's situated right now. But he played really well on with Gaudreau, especially against the Kings. Gaudreau had a really bad turnover, but he made up for it for the goal. So when he threw the puck up the middle. That was a Cam Talbot. He owes Cam some adult beverages for sure. But
at least a few.
right. So, but yeah, nice to see them contribute, and just I'm excited to see where that third line goes, and yeah.
Final one that we'll talk about before we move on to, we'll go next to some of the other Central Division teams because some really interesting things have happened
Mhm.
amongst the Central Division. But I thought it was really interesting, and maybe this was just me kind of reading into it a little bit too much, that Kaapo did not start either game over the weekend. You would think on back to backs. Now, granted, it was the first two games of the season. You'd think that your backup goalie would get into one of those games, and so I don't know if it's just maybe me putting a little bit too much stock in, like, the tendencies of, like, oh, if you play back-to-back games, you have to start, both goalies, but I is that an overreaction or not? Is there concern that Capo did not get um, in either the first or second game of the year?
I think it's a little overreaction. Talbot didn't face a ton of action against the Ducks. I think that factors into it.
Yeah,
There wasn't a whole lot of fatigue, to worry about. Also, I think because of how LA played against Vegas, I think there was an emphasis to make sure you get both wins, and by putting Cam in there, and just getting the season off to a really nice start, especially on the road. And Yeah, that's what I think. It's just it's so important to you know get those early wins and some momentum coming into the home opener. And a weaker team, you think Kappa would get in, but nice to see Cam continue how he played Friday and into
yeah.
Saturday.
It's likely, I mean, with the Wild playing Tuesday, and then not until Saturday and Sunday, maybe you see Capo in one of those 2 games over the weekend, but if they're gonna space the games out like this, there's no reason to just not keep going with Cam. So,
Yeah, I mean, I
eh,
could see him playing, because I think we play the Ducks again, right, at some
yep,
point this week, and so, I could see him playing them, or Nashville's not a great team either. They've
no,
gotten rid of a lot of their good players. We saw Victor Arvidsson, and the way he played against the Wild, he was fantastic. So that was an odd move, but yeah, they're a lot weaker team, so I could definitely see him getting the game against Nashville too.
we'll tell you what, we, are gonna move on to the Central Division because, oh boy, there have been some things that have happened so far in the Central, and so we'll talk about that, recapping a busy weekend in the NHL with Alex Micheletti. More to come here on Locked On Wild after this. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. You're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all of that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called Directv Stream, and it brings your live TV and on demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Just a reminder, we are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Alex Micheletti is our guest today on a Micheletti Monday, and we saw the Central Division get going. Well, some teams at least. I'm not going to lie, there are some interesting results as in the fact that Chicago and Winnipeg and Nashville are all winless, and the Dallas Stars are 1-2. Arizona is 0-1-1. Um, is there legitimate concern for two of the top goalies in the division in Marc Andre Fleury and Connor Hellebuck with how they've started the year?
Yeah, I'm really worried about the Jets. I mean, they not only did they lose to Anaheim and San Jose. I mean, he gave up a ton of goals. He gave up 8 goals. You can't be doing that against two of the weaker teams in the Western Conference. So that was concerning. And then Chicago giving up way too many goals. Defensively, they've been terrible. And Seth Jones, their big acquisition in the offseason, has been off to a terrible start. So it's cause for concern there. I don't think Chicago has a lot of depth on their back end, especially after trading Duncan Keith, who was a big part of that team forever, and no Brent Seabrook anymore too. So they've made a lot of changes to their back end, and so it's going to be a work in progress. Jeremy Colleton, their coach, is definitely going to be close on the chopping block, and their GM Stan Bowman might be right there with them. Yeah, it's a really tough start, and especially, I mean, you still got Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, and they have some really good offensive forwards. It's just I don't know what's going on with that team.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that the Blackhawks were billed as this like uber defensive team with Seth Jones, and hey, we're gonna be one of the enforcers of the division, and they've given up 13 goals in 3 games. Like, boy, oh boy. And it's all of the goals have come like right at the beginning of the game. I think 10 of them are within the first like 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I mean, Dougie Hamilton scored 17 seconds into the game. Teddy
Jeez.
Bluger with the Penguins scored 15 seconds in. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can't. I mean, to get it under 30 seconds, that just sets everything, the vibes off right away. It's tough to come back from when you give up a backbreaker that early.
Wanted to also just talk about the Colorado Avalanche briefly. I mean, Nathan McKinnon is out with COVID. They've got a bunch of other players that are out with COVID, and that's something that is going to hurt them now, but they'll be fine at the end of the day. But something that I think you and I have both kind of agreed upon is with Darcy Kuemper. Like, it seemed like with Grubauer, yeah, he maybe wasn't as good as Kemper, but he was way more level.
Mhm.
Like, with Darcy, it seems like you either get really good, or in the case of the game against the Blues, you get really bad, and he was not good against St. Louis.
No, there's there's no middle ground with Darcy.
Eh.
And when he gets in implode mode, like I said with Jonathan Quick's like the same way. There's no middle game for Jonathan Quick. It can get ugly fast, and it can roller coaster in a bad way for Darcy. But when he's on, he's phenomenal. So it's like, be prepared, Avs fans. Goaltending has always been their Achilles heel, but we'll see if they can get more of the good Darcy than the bad than the really bad Darcy. No middle game for him.
No, it's either high or low. The one final thing that I wanted to key in on before we move to the NHL in general, because some pleasant surprises with the Wild, some surprises in the Central Division. We get a large surprise within the NHL overall that we'll talk about in the Buffalo Sabres being 2-0 somehow. So we'll talk about that next. But I did want to look just to see how our friends are doing in their new homes. Zach Parise through 2 games, getting about 14 minutes of ice time a night, but no points yet on the season for him. And then on the other end, Ryan Suter, he does have 1 assist and plugging away with 23 minutes a night, just just doing his thing. It's going to be fascinating to see how those guys do this year, because we see what we saw last year. Suter still got it, and Parise at this point is basically playing a bottom 6 role.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan's got a little bit more left in the tank than Zach, but Zach's on the perfect team too, with the Islanders. He is in the bottom 6, but he can get a lot more minutes than if he was here in the bottom 6. Because Barry Trotz loves to play veterans, and so he'll get his time for sure. He's back in the Eastern Conference, where I think he's a little bit more comfortable too. And Ryan's a part of one of the best decors in the league. They got Miro Heiskanen that scored the overtime winner against the Rangers, which was beautiful. And they Essa Lindell and John Klingberg. I mean, the list goes on and on with that decor. So he landed in the perfect spot. And we'll see when he plays the first game he plays the Wild. That's gonna be goosebumps. It'll be interesting.
There are going to be some fireworks for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move out a little further because we got a lot of interesting things that have happened in the NHL in general. So we'll finish off today's episode talking NHL at large, a Micheletti Monday coming up. More to come here on today's episode of Locked on Wild. This fall, Built Bar wants to help you celebrate freedom of choice. Did you know Built Bar has an amazing lineup of flavors? They include coconut, cherry barcia, raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, cookies and cream, and German chocolate. No Oktoberfest or pumpkin spice yet, but maybe coming down the line at some point. My favorite, for what it's worth, is raspberry, but if you're not sure where to start, just grab a mixed box and you'll get 2 each of those amazing flavors. Not only are Built Bars great tasting, they are amazingly healthy too. Each Built Bar contains 17 to 18 grams of protein, ranges in calories from 130 to 180, contains only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Amazing tasting, amazingly healthy, all of that wrapped up into every delicious Built Bar. So make sure to head to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off of your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. I've got a listener in my apartment, a fly. So if you see me on the video going nuts, it's because this fly is hanging out and it's driving me crazy. Anyway, thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Continuing our chat with Alex Micheletti here on a Micheletti Monday. Let's just dive right in. Vegas Golden Knights had a rough weekend. They are currently 1-1. Robin Leonard got shellacked by the Los Angeles Kings. They lose Max Pacioretty. They lose Mark Stone. Is Vegas in trouble not only now, but for the rest of the season?
I mean, especially if Mark Stone is out for a while, we still don't know the amount of time. But if he's out for a while too, it's really bad news. And people are saying the Jack Eichel stuff. Well, Eichel wouldn't be able to play for 4 or 5 months, so that
Right.
I mean he wouldn't be able to play until the playoffs. And at that point, are they going to make the playoffs? I mean, that division is weak, but I mean if you have Mark Stone and Pacioretty out, that's really that's awful. And you already don't have Alex Tuck for pretty much almost the entire year too. They're in a really bad spot. I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, you can put people on long-term injury reserve, but I mean, who are you gonna trade? You don't have a whole lot to give up. Peyton Krebs is the guy that's been rumored, but I don't think Vegas wants to give him up, and so it's gonna be really tough. I think they're so lucky that they're in that Pacific Division with a lot of the weaker California teams. But if they pull it off and maintain, hanging around for the playoffs, kudos to Peter DeBoer and the coaching staff.
That's just some miracle working that they got going on there. Tampa Bay Lightning have also looked flat to start the season, and so I think it's just interesting that we see all of these teams, Vegas, Tampa Bay. There are a handful of others too that have just started off the year and have not. Toronto is a very good example as well. Is this just kind of a byproduct of going back to the full schedule, or are we just seeing some of these teams kind of start to trend a little downwards?
I think the teams are trending a little bit downwards. Some of the teams that were used to being powerhouses, a lot of the teams have changed goalies too.
Yeah.
So that's interesting with Tampa too. They don't have the luck to with the long-term injury reserve trick, and so they have to, they had to meet the cap, and you lose your entire third line, and Yanni Gord, Barclay Goodrow, and in that crew, it's and Blake Coleman. It's tough. I mean, you're introducing a lot of new guys into the lineups too. But they showed against Detroit too that they can they can turn it on. They won that one 7-6 in overtime, so that was something else.
Jeez.
But you also got teams like Edmonton. Edmonton picking up Zach Hyman was a huge move by them. They're off to a 2-0 start, and McDavid hat trick on against the Flames last night. I mean, watch out for that team. They just, and Jesse Puljujarvi, I showed you the highlight. He had goal last night. I mean, yeah, they didn't need another scorer on that team. So they are impressive. They get if Mike Smith, who is ancient, he's almost 40 years old now. If he can be decent, watch out for Edmonton because they have it all going right now. Another team that I'm really impressed with is Florida. I think Florida has it all now. And they were able to get that contract extension for Alexander Barkov. So I mean, watch out for Florida. They are going to be a team to watch out for in the playoffs if they get
Yeah.
the goaltending.
And also, I guess, watch out for the Buffalo Sabres, who are 2-0, because of course.
The fact that they were on national TV on the NHL Network, I don't know whose choice that was. I mean, what a crazy game that was. I mean, against Arizona. I mean, Arizona was running out guys. I mean, Andrew Ladd scored. He hadn't scored a game in like a year and a half in the NHL.
Oh,
It
boy.
was crazy. They had Jay Beagle as a first line center. It's just craziness. And in Buffalo's roster, I mean, they got guys that it's like what I mean. They have Jeff Skinner making $9 million, and he's not doing much. Our old buddy Casey Middlestad's out there, and just a hodgepodge of names. Kyle Okposo, who I thought had nothing left, and he scores a big goal against Montreal the other night, and I mean they take out Montreal too. So I mean that was an impressive win at home in front of no fans too. So it's crazy. It's too bad because when Buffalo's good, that those fans are crazy, as we know with the
Yeah.
Bills Mafia, and just it's a good sports town for sure.
Yeah. Enjoy the wins while they can, because they're not going to have many this year.
No.
Just a couple of final things I wanted to get to. I know both of us are on Ovechkin watch.
Yeah.
And he is red hot to start the season. There's a lot of work for him to do to catch Gretzky, but especially in the first couple years of his extension, if he can keep up this kind of a pace, he could hit 50 this year, and that makes the road a lot easier for him to inevitably get there.
Yeah, it's impressive what he's doing, especially without his good buddy Nicholas Backstrom, who hurt his hip and is on on the IR. He's just in his office. That's he always scores from there, and just impressive on the power play as always. And looks like he's really getting Evgeny Kuznetsov going too, who's very polarizing with all the off the ice issues, and everybody thought they were going to trade him, and so he's got that Russian connection going with them. And yeah, Washington's off to a hot start. TJ Oshie playing extremely well too, so it's fun. I told you this too. No one celebrates a goal like Alex Ovechkin. It's like he's a
Accurate.
kid out there still. He's just playing the game he loves, and I mean, I think he can play until he's 40, 41, 42. So
Mhm.
he'll cut it close. But as long as he's playing power play, there's no one better on the power play than Alex Ovechkin.
That is fully accurate. Also, a tip of the cap, or in this case, the beanie, to Marco Rossi, who scored his first career AHL goal for the Iowa Wild. It came in a losing effort, but nifty move by Rossi, and so congratulations.
Yeah, I'm excited. Excited to continue to watch that the baby wild, as we would call him, grow. Yeah, congrats to Marco. He's worked so hard to overcome
Yep.
what he did last year with COVID, and he's just a workout machine. And is a rink rat. Loves the game of hockey so much and plays with so much passion out there. So there's I think they're definitely grooming him to be up at some point, especially with that center depth. I think they're definitely going to need him, especially if they do move Eck around, it'd be kind of fun to see him out there with 97 and Zuccarello. But we'll see how Eck does, and watch him continue to grow his game too after the big contract.
100%. Well, I think that's going to take us to the end of today's episode. And so thanks, Alex, for hanging out today, gearing us up for another full week of hockey and recapping an eventful first weekend in the NHL. Make sure, now that you have completed your first listen of the day, which again, thank you for making it Locked On Wild, head to Locked On NHL to get a recap of all of that action throughout the league and much more on the Locked On NHL podcast. Make sure to give Locked On Wild a follow wherever you listen. All of our social media channels are active with unique content throughout the year, so make sure to check that out as well. And you can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.